Today we'll be going over Chapter 2, Life Skills, from Your Milady Text. What are life skills? Life skills are just the way in which we're able to cope with things that happen every day, being able to find a greater outcome for whatever we are experiencing, whether in our personal lives or in our professional lives. While we know the importance of making sure that we have good technical skills, and that is very important in this industry. But we also have to make sure that we're able to apply our life skills. They're just as important because they allow us to be able to understand individuals. This is a customer service business, which means that we are the first point of contact when it comes to our clients. So in studying life skills, we always want to make sure that we're practicing good life skills so we can have a more productive and satisfying career. There is nothing worse in the world than doing something that you do not love. So being able to understand how to apply different life skills, in which we will be discussing today, we'll talk about how to be able to get those things done. We also want to study life skills so we can have the ability to deal with the most difficult circumstances. And also being able to build self-esteem. Okay, so we're going to talk a little about our first objective. It's just to make sure that we're listing the principles that contribute to personal and professional success. So in building our personal and professional success, we want to make sure that we have some things in action. So some of the life skills that we can put in action is just making sure that we're being helpful and we're caring to others, that we're making good friends. Okay, I'll stop right here. At this point in our lives, we may not need new friends because in this world, we know that friends are defined in many different ways. But we must be able to coexist with individuals. We must feel good about ourselves. Once we feel good about ourselves, it allows us to be more productive in the things that we're doing. Also, we want to remain and maintain a cooperative attitude. In this industry, we are considered to be creatives. So we have so many different ideas. But we do want to be able to understand how to cooperate and how to be able to work with one another. We also have to approach our work with a strong sense of responsibility. This is a very good one because we are responsible for what we do, not for what others do. So once we understand exactly what that looks like, it will allow us to keep our own emotions in check. We must be consistent in our work. So whatever we begin to do, we must follow through. Also, we want to make sure that we're adapting successfully to different situations. Now, that can look a little different for a lot of different things. So being adaptable just means that in this life, we know that there's going to be change. Even in our industry, we may set out to have one hairstyle in mind. And even though we may follow a particular process, there may be some things that may not always be the way that we want them to turn out. That's how we have to look at life. It doesn't mean that we have to just scratch and start all the way over, but we must be able to adapt as professionals, personally and creatively, to make sure that we are achieving a greater outcome. Okay, so let's interpret the psychology of success. Okay, so what does success look like to you? Success may look different for a lot of different people, and it may look different for what we expect. But that's when we have to learn the process of self-actualization, which it just means that we must fulfill our own potential. And that's a lifelong commitment. Now, this is why life skill is called a life application skill, because this is something that we must do every day. Whenever we come in contact with someone, we have to understand that this is a process that we must do on a daily. So in building our self-esteem, we must make sure that it's based on our inner strength. And one thing about our self-esteem is that it begins with us. No one else can tell you about your self-esteem. That's something that you must build. And that comes into play by being positive, making sure that you are loving your work and that you're not so self-critical. We have to visualize success. I want everyone right now to close their eyes for 1 second and just think about something that you associate with being successful. If you were able to have a picture in your mind once you close your eyes, then that means it can happen. It can happen because once you close your eyes and you blocked everything out and you focused on something that you wanted or something that you wanted to obtain, then that came from you. So if you can think it and believe it, then you definitely can achieve it. You want to build on your strengths. We all have so many different things that we do well. So the things that we do well, we need to continue to build upon those things. If you are great at customer service, hey, that is a strength. If you are excellent at hair cutting, that is a strength. So we need to look at ourselves when we're understanding what it is exactly that we do well. We all have things that we need to work on. But while we are building on our strengths and when we are acknowledging that some of these things may not be where we want to be, or we may see things, and when we're honest with ourselves that we need to develop within ourselves, it allows us to be able to tackle those things as well. We have to be kind to ourselves. If we are not kind to ourselves, how do we expect others to be kind to us? Only you will have the best knowledge about you. We have to stay true to ourselves. So we have to always understand that we are unique and we possess a valuable asset. And when we are true to ourselves, we acknowledge those things. We must practice new behaviors. What that means is that we have to be diligent in developing by practicing, because that is the only way that we will achieve greatness is by practicing. And that is with everything. So when we learn something new, we have learned it. But when we continue to practice it, then we have perfected it. And we must keep our personal lives from our work life. And as a student or as a human, we all have so many different things that may be going on outside of our hours that we are in the classroom. But once we understand how to manage that, then we can separate those things. We have to understand that things that we deal with in the school setting, we have to deal with those things. Things that are happening in our personal lives, it doesn't mean that those things go away, but we have to learn how to manage the two to get both of those things done. And we have to keep our energy up. When things begin to pull us down and we are bombarded sometimes with negative thoughts or experiences, we have to separate those things. We have to acknowledge that this may not have been the greatest thing, but we have to keep going. The only way to get to your end game is to keep moving. When we stop moving, we become stagnant. So we want to always make sure that we are moving at all times. Okay, as I've just discussed the principles that contribute to personal and professional success, now we're going to move on to a mission statement. What is a mission statement? It's just an essential part of business, which establishes the purpose and values for which an individual or institution lives and works by. It provides us with a sense of direction by defining, guiding principles and clarifying goals, as well as how an organization operates. Now, that was a mouthful. And even in skipping over some of those words, that is a definition by reading out of the book verbatim. But when we think about our mission statement, to be able to flow through that category of how to be able to define that, all it is telling us is that it defines our purpose, our mission. So that's what a mission statement is. Just like when we are thinking about something that we're wanting to do and is purposeful, that should be our mission statement. A mission statement should also reflect how we feel about certain things, our interests. So anytime that we're thinking about something that interests us, it should be able to put us in the mindset of how can I create a mission statement. Just an example for me. I want to move forward and strive for excellence daily. That would be my mission statement. That's true to me and true for me as an individual. We are all individuals and we will all have our own mission statement. But that's just an example of what it will look like for me. I challenge you all right now to take a second and write down what your mission statement would be. In this industry, we are known as creatives. So that just means that we have a different outlook on what we see to be the big picture. So creativity is also an unlimited inner resource of ideas and solutions. So we must keep our creativity flowing. And some of the things that we can do is we have to always stay positive. Now, staying positive does not mean that we are forgetting what is actually happening, because sometimes things are happening and we have to acknowledge that, but we have to continue to stay positive. Because if we have a 50-50 chance, if we're going to be negative, we know what that outcome will be. So why not take that other 50 and try to be positive? Because either way, whatever is going to happen, it's going to happen. We always have to look for a solution to make sure that we are having a favorable outcome. We must look around for creative inspiration. Whatever it is that you love to do, find something that inspires you. If it's poetry, if it's singing, if it's magazines, if it's just going to the park and meditating, we have to find things that will always keep us inspired. And improving our vocabulary. That's something that we should all do on a daily. It just means that we will keep our minds active. So when we choose words that may not be a word that we may commonly use, we are keeping our mind active. Lastly, if we must always keep our minds creative, we need to surround ourselves with others who are like-minded. And like-minded does not mean that you have to agree on everything that someone says, but they need to be just as passionate about moving forward as you are. Now let's get into explaining what long-term and short-term goals are. Okay, goal setting is just the identification of long and short-term goals. So when you know what you want, you can draw a circle around your desires and destination. So that's what it should look like when we begin to set goals. They should be our own personal goals. If we think about short-term goals, those are usually goals that we can obtain in about a year or less. Just like I'm wanting to complete cosmetology school. That would be a short-term goal for you guys because that's something that can happen. A long-term goal that can be anywhere from 5 years to 10 years or as little as 2 years. But one thing about a goal is that as long as it is reasonable for and to you, then that is your goal. A long-term goal may be to open up a chain of salons in the next 2 years after you graduate. If that's something that's obtainable and feasible for you, then that's something that you should go ahead and be able to check that box off as a goal that you want as a long-term goal. Now, one thing about goals, when they do not always happen as we would like for them to happen, what successful people do is that we look at that and we course correct that. It doesn't mean that we totally scratch that out. It just means that sometimes we need a new game plan, and that is perfectly fine. Because when things don't happen as the way we want them to happen, then what will put us in a position to do things differently is to look at the situation differently. And sometimes that may mean that we need to prepare a little more. Sometimes that means that we need to save a little more. Sometimes that may mean that we need to develop a new circle of people that we are connecting with. So all of those different things will actually assist us on our journey. So if you see something and you have a goal and it has not happened in the time frame in which you would have liked for it to happen, then all that you have to do, instead of putting a period at the end of that, put a comma. And that way you'll know how to move forward in things that you need to do additionally. While discussing goal setting, let's go ahead and move forward to discuss the most effective ways to manage time. Because one thing about time, ready or not, is continuing to tick and to talk. So each of us, we have an inner organizer when it comes to time. And that just means that we have to learn how to manage different things according to what our inner organizer is telling us. When we pay attention to our inner organizer, we can learn how to manage our time efficiently. We have to learn how to prioritize. Every day when we wake up, we have a laundry list of things that we must do or that we want to do. But in able to prioritize, we have to think of those things that we must do first. And that way we order our tasks on a to-do list. And that's going to be most important to least important. And I know sometimes that's difficult because sometimes there's a sense of urgency for all things. But when we break those things up, it becomes less overwhelming for us. We also have to learn how to give ourselves some downtime. Whenever we see that we're getting frustrated, because we are all human and these things actually take place in the real world, sometimes we have to step back. And when you need to know what your point is, when you need to step back. But we also need to know how to communicate effectively where we can communicate that to others that we do need a moment. And that is another type of life application skill that we begin to develop from the beginning of time. And it does get better. It's just like a muscle when you exercise. The more and the better that we learn how to communicate, the easier things do become. So making sure that we do get that downtime when we do get frustrated will allow us to step back and to revisit what we were trying to tackle before. Now that we have discussed time management, we're going to move forward and talk about ethics, which are equally important. So ethics are the moral principles of which we live and work. So that just means that everything that we do, we have a moral code. We should have a moral code. And when we think about that moral code, it just allows us to move forward daily while we are working, even in the salon or even in our own personal lives. Now, in order to have professional ethics, we have to make sure that we have self-care. And that's something that I just want to take a second to go over. So self-care just means that we are helping ourselves first before we are able to help someone else. We must take the time out. It's essential just to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves so we can be a benefit to others. We must have integrity. So integrity just means that we're maintaining and aligning our behavior with our actions for our values. So integrity is always something that I would just kind of sum up. Whoever you are and whatever you choose to do should always align. We must always keep discretion. And that just means that everything is not to be shared with everyone. We all have enough on our plate sometimes where we don't have any room for anything that's going to be extra than what we can consume. So we always want to reach out to others if there are concerns or if we do have opinions, because that is important. But we want to make sure that we are containing that just between ourselves. We do not want to ever breach anyone's confidentiality by not using discretion. If someone is trusting you with information, especially if it's your client or even your peers, then you need to keep that. And if it's something that you do not want to be privy to, if there's information that just may be a little bit too heavy, then what you can do is try to let them know that, or help them with a resource, or ask someone else if they may be able to better assist them than you are. Also, we have to communicate. Now, this is something that we must do throughout our careers, professionally and personally. So learning to communicate just means that we're going to extend our communication to the best of our ability to our customers and our coworkers. We have to be aware of what we say and how we say it. Also, our nonverbal communication is just as important as what we say. To wrap up the whole process of the life skill application, we must understand how to list and understand healthy and positive attitudes. Developing a positive attitude and personality is key in this business. We interact with people from all walks of life, so we should be able to maintain a daily relationship with them. Now, with our clients, we are not with them forever, but we are with them long enough to develop a relationship with them. So we must always make sure that we are being diplomatic. And that just means just being assertive is good because it helps people to understand your position. However, it is a short step from assertive to aggressive or even bullying. So we should always be able to convey what we're wanting to say, but we have to be conscious in the way we are communicating that. We also must use a pleasing tone of voice, because the way that we speak to someone and the tone of our voice can turn a good situation bad in seconds. So the way that we speak to someone, we have to be conscious and aware of that at all times. Now, these traits also help us develop the whole person. So an individual's personality is the sum of his or her characteristics, attitudes, and behaviors. Attitude improvement is a process that continues throughout life. This is something that we must do daily. In both our business and personal lives, a pleasing attitude gains more associates, clients, and friends. If we look at this point in our lives, because some things that we do, we may say we don't need any more friends, but what we do need is to be able to coexist with everyone. Because in this customer service business, they may not be our friends per se, because by definition, that can be a lot. After going through this lesson, we've talked about the principles that contribute to personal and professional success. We've learned how to create a mission statement. We've also learned what goals look like, long-term and short-term. We've talked about effective ways to manage time, what ethics are, and to be able to understand the characteristics of a healthy and positive attitude. As I've said before, all of these things will take work daily, but it will become easier. Thank you, and remember to always manifest your destiny.